Welcome to the Scrum.org Community Podcast, the podcast from the home of Scrum. In this podcast, Agile experts, including professional Scrum trainers and other industry thought leaders, share their stories and experiences. We also explore hot topics in our space with thought-provoking, challenging, energetic discussions. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello and welcome to the Scrum.org Community Podcast. I'm your host, Dave West, CEO here at Scrum.org. Today, we're talking Scrum Master, we're talking scaling, and we're talking with one of the organizations that were one of the first organizations to do Scrum, over 20 years, maybe almost 30 years ago. And we're talking with Brodie Green from Pega Systems. Really excited to continue the conversation. Actually, we started just before the holidays, which is great. Brodie is the director of Agile Delivery Services based in Pega's head office, which is in the Boston area. Welcome to the podcast, Brodie.
Thank you very much, Dave. Excited to be here.
Yeah, it's great. We just to bring our listeners up to speed, Brodie and I bumped into each other. I think we've met before, but we bumped into each other at this event called Give Thanks for Scrum. And we, talked for ages at this event about the future of Scrum and the future of Scrum Master and why scaling is so hard. So I'm really excited to get him on the platform and to get him involved in the podcast, because I think, Brodie, you've got a lot to say. So Pega started their Agile journey like a million years ago, not literally a million years ago, though it may feel that to many people. And in fact, Ken Schwaber, and I was talking to him yesterday, we have a regular catch up, and Ken Schwaber, the co-creator of Scrum, did training and consulting. He couldn't remember, but he thinks somewhere in the sort of 25-year mark, which is crazy to think. I know that's only 2000, so I guess it isn't that long ago, but it feels that way. So can you bring our listeners up to speed on the journey and where Pega Systems is at the moment?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So, as you had mentioned, Pega's been around for some time now. It was actually founded in the early 80s. And the main focus is on business process management. There's a core component of kind of CRM. Some of our big competitors, Salesforce, ServiceNow, Appian, many others. And we've been really focused on kind of a core target market of like that Fortune 1000, Fortune 2000 style companies. So with that, they have very complex, large orchestration systems behind the scenes. You'll see a lot of legacy applications just based on the sheer size. And we're focused on, digital transformation. How can we pull these various disparate systems together, make sure that they're talking to each other, in some cases, full out, replace them. And it's kind of interesting because Pega has been on the forefront of kind of this low code trend for a number of years. Their mission's actually to change the way that the world builds software. And that's kind of where my group has come into play. If Pega's trying to change how everybody else is building software, we're kind of the engine that changes how Pega builds software. That's the way that I think about it. And my role as the director of Agile Delivery Services is to try and get high quality working software out the door as quickly as we can. And that has been an ever learning, continuous growth mindset, as I'm sure many folks can kind of relate to. We've had an interesting journey with Agile. You mentioned it's been at least 15 years. I won't go as far back as 20, but I think at least 15 years they started the Agile journey. And I wish I had the book with me, but somebody had written an internal book at Pega with like how we should build software. And it was kind of their own internal Agile manifesto, which was kind of interesting, right? And there's still a lot of truth that comes from that. But obviously, we've grown and evolved. The company has scaled pretty significantly since that time frame, and doubling or tripling in size. And as you add more people, you need to change what systems you're using. So just like you would grow from a small startup from like managing your books on Excel, you might start to use Quicken or eventually some type of ERP system. And that's kind of the way that I've seen Agile evolve at Pega. People were planning on a whiteboard, and not to say that doesn't still happen, But over time, you're like, hey, how can I do, capacity allocation, resource allocation? How can I demonstrate roadmaps in a global setting that doesn't just work on that same whiteboard? And I think that's where we've come in. So yeah, that's a little bit about what Pega has done and some of the changes that have occurred over the last 15 or so years.
And I think, from my exposure to Pega, the core business, this ERP business process tools, incredibly complex. Most of your clients are heavily legislated, heavily compliant, and that level of complexity sort of has forced you to work in a very agile way, because though people think they know exactly how things work until you deliver something, you never really totally, and you expose it to your clients, and they say, well, that's not. So that kind of more iterative, incremental process. So it,
Exactly.
as you scale, and I guess 20 or 15, 20 years ago, it was a lot of people in the Boston area. Now you've got a global footprint, developing in India, etc. Talk a little bit about some of the characteristics of that scaling. What
Sure.
have you seen that have been the biggest friction points, that have really made these very, because you did have, from what I've observed, very autonomous, very smart delivery teams working away, and they were working great. But as you scale, there's obviously some friction points. Talk a little bit about that, Brodie.
Sure. Yeah, it's kind of like we had Boston area. We also have offices located in the Netherlands, Poland, and a big development center in India. So if I look at the numbers more recently, we have probably close to 6,000 employees. And of that, we have probably 1,500 developers. And with 1,500 developers in our product engineering organization, that's a lot of teams that you put together. So we have well
Yeah.
over 100 teams, probably close to maybe 130, 140 teams just doing development in our product engineering organization. Um, that takes a lot of coordination, and folks don't want to have a heavy process associated with it. So if you want to be able to move fast, pivot quickly, respond to market changes like we've seen over the last couple of years with the real boom in AI, obviously your product roadmap's going to change. And if we had kind of this, I would say, older style waterfall approach, it would be very challenging to move that ship. Don't get me wrong, even with the agile approach or even some hybrid ability, it's still challenging. So we've gone through a few iterations of different scaling practices. The first one that I was close to was actually implementation of the Spotify model. So we went for alliance, tribes, and squads. That actually gave us a lot of structure, and we found that it helped articulate clear visions for different parts of the organization. Some of that we still use today in terms of kind of a reporting style model, but we also found challenges with it. And you'll kind of tease this out throughout the course of the podcast here. Pega has tried many of these different models and tried to pick and retain what we learned from each one. And I think each kind of theory will have something new that you're going to go through that you can keep, and then something that you've said, this doesn't quite work for us. So with Spotify model, part of that challenge was we started to create silos. And I'm sure you've heard this from many different groups. So we said, all right, let's see what else is out there. We moved to the SAFe model about 3 years ago, started implementing trains. We started using release train engineers. We had another set of very defined groups that also caught a lot of momentum. And at that point in time, Pega was, I think, really chugging along. And we actually introduced a new product. So we had Pega Infinity, which is our core platform. That's the one that's been there for 15 years. You'll see that in all of our marketing. You go to pega.com, all that type of stuff. They came up with a new product during our R&D phase. And that really was kind of the trigger for us to evolve our agile practices, because we had the train set up for one product, right? You think of it like a solution train level. When the second product came in, we needed to adapt. And that changed, like, in hindsight, it's simple. You think about like, oh yeah, we needed to do something different for the other product because they have a totally different life cycle. But we didn't realize that, I think, at the time period. And people started to sense, again, a sense of friction. Like, hey, the train model's not working for me. I have groups that are, splitting time. I'm swivel chairing between the new product that we're building, our existing market leader. How do I work in this type of organization? And more recently, we've actually kind of grown out of SAFe. And I would say we have kind of a hybrid model today that basically is applying some of the Spotify model type of stuff, some of SAFe, and then some also Pega type of learnings where we're just trying to, again, get back to that core mission of building high quality software getting out to the door.
I think that's a really important message. And it's something that I've heard in many organizations that are quite mature in terms of their agility and how they look at delivery. This idea that ultimately it is unique to you and you need to build on the practices of many different approaches, because depending on the situation, for instance, obviously your new product, it has the release trains probably you were revolving too quickly. Your trains were sort of in the station, and you're really like, no, we need it to leave now. And you're like, we can't leave now. There's another, the trains. It's incredibly complicated, and the catering's not on the train, and nobody's cleaned the toilet yet. I'm probably overusing the train analogy here, but I'm British, and we have fabulous trains that are always in the station and never on time. So anyway, so you've got that, and then you've got this existing product which has a very defined customer base. They expect releases in a. I mean, yes, you do have continuous delivery, but there's a very marketing driven. It's got a regular cadence, and these two worlds clash. So you have to build what you're something that's unique for you. Was that as painful as it sounds, or how did you manage to sort of go, okay, we're doing bits of SAFe, we're doing bits of Spotify, and we're actually doing something of our own? How did that work? Because people like their dogma, don't they, unfortunately?
Yeah, I think folks, it's challenging, right? Because if you consider yourself a change agent within the organization, you're naturally going to be seen as the person that's like bringing in these new things all the time. And there's a balance, right? How much can you introduce at a time period? How long should you wait? So if you're going to swap between, different things, you need to have a very clear direction, and it needs to be supported all the way up through your leadership level. I think that's part of the challenge that we had at that point in time is we didn't get the full buy-in that we needed. Even if the teams were ready with it, even if our middle management was, maybe, senior leadership had a slightly different idea, or it could have been the opposite. Senior leadership believes in one approach, and our team level, it has got something going on that's a little bit different. So being the conduit between those two sides of it, as also between kind of the technical approach and what the business wants, has been, I think, a critical component. It was painful, but it was also a great growing and learning opportunity. So you touched on it a little bit, but our existing product was basically once a year type of release. You put it out the door, big marketing announcement. There's quite a bit that goes into it. Even though we have continuous integration, continuous deployment going on in our internal systems, when you have that big, once a year type of release, everybody's going to jump on that new product, and you're going to have to support it from a maintenance perspective. That's a lot different than like a pure SaaS solution, something that has microservices in the background. You're deploying to production. It could be daily. It could be more frequent than that. And just based on the nature of that delivery, we had to think about what approach would fit for each product.
Yeah, and obviously it's funny you mentioned, Brodie, the importance of keeping everybody going in the same direction. The teams have a capacity for change, middle management and the systems around that, whether it's recruiting, whether it's incentives, whether HR, whatever, have a capacity to change. And then you've got the leaders, the executives who have a capacity to change. All of those groups are focused on different things usually.
Right.
And so I guess that's your job, right, as director of Agile Delivery, to sort of try to get them all to be maybe not all on the same page, but at least in the same book, and bring that. Any tips for our listeners how did you do that?
One of the biggest things that I found successful was convincing folks on the value of upfront planning. We were like kind of behind the eight ball with this, and I'm sure many groups were, where we would have a release start,
Yeah.
and 2 months in, we would finally get our set of like, this is what we should be working on. So if that 2 month gap hits, you've already lost a bunch of time. Folks they're still working on things, but it may not be what you ultimately need to achieve. So aligning on those outcomes up front was really critical. So we moved from like this once a year type of big room planning where everybody comes together and you're sitting on a whiteboard or sticky notes or whatever, and moved into, at the time, a quarterly planning cadence. And that was like mind blowing for people. They're like,
Yeah.
oh, quarterly planning? Like, I can't get together this often with folks. And like, this is not going to be valuable. We were doing it for like 2 or 3 days at a time. I mentioned the geographic differences. There's a lot of time
Yep.
zones that come into play. And you want to be able to communicate effectively with people. So we eventually convinced everybody, like, let's try quarterly planning. We'll do things like say-do ratio, all these types of commitments. And that was like, okay, I think it was better than the once a year stuff, but it
Yeah,
was still like super process heavy. And we got so much feedback, like, I can't sit here. Is this valuable? All this type of stuff. And I had to do almost like a little bit of salesmanship internally to say, like, here's the benefits of this, right? Here's the predictability that we've achieved as a result. And here's what I think we can do next. And the what's next piece ended up being more of a continuous planning model. So we broke it up from quarterly into basically a 6-week cadence, and we made it much smaller, right? People just got together for 3 hours maybe instead of 2 full days. And they said, here's what we're doing next. Here's what we're thinking about. And then we just used kind of our sprint planning sessions to let the teams refine that. So that transition from once a year to quarterly to continuous was, I think, the most valuable thing that we've done over the last 5 years.
And do you still do a quarterly kind of business review, priorities, direction kind of stuff? Or have you completely gone, which is, I mean, that's the holy grail, by the way, Brodie. I'm loving what you're putting down here. But how do you keep the business? Because the quarters are really important for business. They love
Yeah.
their quarters. So when I was running an engineering organization, at Tosstop, I ended up connecting my cadence to their cadence because it was the only time we could actually all get together with this is how it went, this is where it's going, this is what we need to do next. Do you still do a QBR with the business, but then that filters into the 6-week planning with the teams, the product teams?
Certainly the sales cycle is still there, right? When you talk
Yeah.
about whether it's annually or quarterly targets that they want to hit. But I think within product engineering, we've found that we're just trying to shorten those feedback loops. Like that's the
Wow.
key piece of it. And I'm not saying we're great at this yet, but at least folks are thinking about it and we want to get there. I don't have any reason to wait for the next quarterly business review to go talk to, stakeholder feedback that comes through. We want to hear that early and often. Certainly, there's forums that are set up for that. And we have a very, I think, good relationship with our go-to-market staff and product engineering. The tighter that relationship gets, the better and more receptive we're going to be to what the market needs.
That's an awesome message. I aspired to that. I never really, it was a really small organization as well. It was just, yeah, maybe I could have done better. Oh well.
I'm sure we can too. So it might sound better than it actually is. I'll say that when folks come in new to the organization, for example, if we're hiring somebody for program management or a Scrum Master role, Agile Delivery Lead, I'll mention to them that Pega has gotten to a certain level in agility. So if you're looking to like do some type of transformation from, we're introducing Agile, that's not where we're at. I want us to be from like, we're doing well to best in class in the industry. That's the jump that I'm looking to make. And those are the type of people that we're looking to pull in. Luckily, we've had some really good hiring and we've had some great opportunities from other folks that have come in and they're bringing insights from outside and from the industry. So that's the type of stuff we're trying to do.
That sounds awesome. All right, so let's move on and talk a little bit about Scrum Master role.
Yeah.
Because, you've had Scrum Masters for a long time, and many people in the Boston area, obviously Scrum.org is based in the Boston area as well.
Mhm.
Many people have been to Pega or Fidelity. That's kind of like, that
Or
is kind
both.
of, or both, or in Liberty Mutual occasionally. So there's these companies that have sort of become such important sort of like enablers for agility in the Boston region, and Scrum Masters kind of went to these. Yeah, they sort of made the circuit, I guess, or some of them did. So I'm really interested in the evolution of that sort of capability in your organization. Can you talk a little bit about that, Brodie?
Yeah, definitely. So we have, I don't know, probably somewhere around 40 Scrum Masters in the traditional role, I would say, kind of spread across the organization in a few different groups, maybe a little bit more. Um, and that role has been critical for a long time, right? Because you're helping teams be self-sufficient. You're going to try and increase velocity, all the stuff that a lot of people talk about. The interesting trend that I've seen more regular, like over the last couple of years, has been actually demand for more above the Scrum support. So whether that's helping coach on, projects or initiatives, it could be technical or non-technical. It could be working directly with product management or an engineering manager and coaching on a specific skill set. It could be, hosting workshops that are focused on specific targeted, efforts, some type of work challenge that we're facing. But really, the trend has been how can we move beyond the team level, above the Scrum, to influence agility at scale? That's what I've really been interested in more recently. And that's what I think we've actually been able to deliver more impact to the organization. So that's probably the biggest part.
And tell me about that. Are they still called Scrum Masters? I mean, they're still focused on effectiveness. It's just
Mhm.
more than it's about delivering more value quicker with the teams, ensuring that they're delivering on that cadence and teams of teams and the like.
Mhm.
But has their job title changed? Have you measured them changed? What's happened? Talk a little bit about that, Brodie.
So with the kind of safe model that we used from a couple years ago, we had introduced like that RTE, release train engineer
Yeah.
type of approach. And that's kind of what unlocked some of this. And that was more of a role rather than the job title itself. But that got people thinking about, all right, we have team level support. How else can I utilize these skill sets? And if you become, I'll say it again, that conduit between leadership and the teams, or business and the technical side, you start to be able to identify gaps, mitigate risks that other people aren't seeing, because you have a better picture of the whole ecosystem. And once we saw the value that people were getting out of that, we actually did go through a rebranding effort. And this happened probably Q3 of 2025, just about the time period that we were talking at Give Thanks for Scrum. We were actually going through that rebrand. And the way that we had gone for it was basically evolving the Scrum Master role, the traditional title, into an Agile Delivery Lead. And that approach kind of coupled together some of the core skill sets that you would have already expected, in
Yeah.
addition to that above the Scrum impact, and even a little bit of blending of project and program management as well.
Yeah, and the reason why in the Scrum Guide it is a set of accountabilities, Scrum Master, is exactly that reason. Ken and Jeff never thought that it would be a job title. It's good that it's a job title because it certainly helped our business and paid my mortgage. So thank you for that. But it is a set of capabilities, and then you have to extend those capabilities depending on your situation or your context. And it's about that sort of scaling that I think is a key idea that you've really latched onto, and I think that's super important. So, if I'm an agile delivery person,
Mhm.
am I how am I measured? Is it delivery capability? Is it or is it just product delivery? How does that work, Brodie?
This is a challenging part, right? So I think with
Yeah,
folks that are hands-on keyboard, pure developers or other roles, you might be able to say like, here is your specific outcome or target. And what
yeah,
I've seen during this rebranding effort is a lot of thoughts around how will I be measured? End of the year talent cultivation cycle is happening for a lot of companies, including ours. It's a great time to think about, all right, what's the next step for different folks? And they want to say, like, how can I be, if I'm, this job level, how can I be at the next level? How do I know that's true? And what I've found to be even more successful than like a generic one pager, like on measuring folks, is trying to align our people to the product deliverables and the
yeah,
success of a project. There can be some in between, but if the project's successful and you've contributed to that, then you're going to be successful. If the project's not going well, let's look into it a little bit more, right? And we'll understand, hey, what happened in these different areas? How did you perform? It really comes down to your working agreement. And I think with each of our stakeholders, we want to set that up pretty clearly. If we have two teams, one team is brand new, one team is very mature, you're going to want to give them a different set of services, right? You're not going to want to say for both
yeah,
teams, standard approach, I'm going to run your daily stand up, I'm going to run your retro, I'm going to do whatever other ceremonies. You're going to want to tailor this. So
yeah.
kind of going through like almost like a consulting type of approach, but from an internal perspective, that's really the route that we've gone through. But I won't lie. It is challenging to find consistent ways to measure the impact.
Yeah, I think the consistent thing's the challenge. I think that the model that you describe, Brodie, is something that I've seen very successful, where ultimately you build, I don't want to call it a contract, but each engagement you have a contract with very clear measurable outcomes that you're
Mm-hmm.
focused on. And you as a delivery leader or a scrum master or as a coach or whatever the job title is, you go and you find your stakeholders and you build that contract and you
Exactly.
make it transparent, and then you incrementally deliver against that contract. And just like a product, you may discover along the way that something that you're aspiring to, maybe it's about uh, making the team more autonomous so they're less dependent on shared services and
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's about speed, maybe it's about product and clarity of goal and stuff like that, whatever those things are. As you push into it, you'll discover, because the nature, it's a complex system, right, that might be wrong, and then that gives you the ability to redo that contract. But it's a very disciplined approach, and that can be a challenge. Even though cobbler's children, maybe we encourage everybody to be very disciplined, build a backlog, everything's in the backlog, but ourselves, oh dear, that can be it. So discipline is a key aspect of that. Have you found that as well, Freddie?
Definitely, especially with like I'll say cultural differences, right? So there's
Yeah,
different ways that each of these ecosystems are functioning, and when I talk to our team in Europe, it can be very different, even between Poland and the Netherlands, right? The Dutch
very
are
different.
right on
Yeah.
you. They want to tell you what's going on right away, right to your face, and if you use that same nomenclature, I'm speaking to our team in the Netherlands versus India, it's quite different. And you can say the exact same message and have two totally different responses. So that's where I've certainly found challenges. And I'm trying to like have our group go out and build that working agreement and then maintain it consistently. But it is hard, right? You need to rely on different folks. You have to empower them that they're going to make the right decisions. And I think that has been another key aspect, is not to be a bottleneck on that and try and, you know, trust them, verify that things are going well, check in with the different stakeholders to ensure we're supporting their needs. Um, but yeah, that's basically the way that we're thinking about it.
And then obviously one of your key jobs is to ensure that the executives, as it were, the people that are ultimately paying for these, or agreeing these things are paid for,
Mm-hmm.
are on board. Because I've had many executives say, well, why do we need these delivery leads again? We've got engineering management, we've got
Right.
product. What are these people doing? And ensuring that they understand that these people are very focused on the system that binds these two groups, as it were.
Definitely. That's a challenge I think we probably all faced, regardless of the company. And I think it's actually a fair ask, right? If you have $100 to spend and you can spend it on anything, you got to know where you're getting your return on investment. So amplifying that impact, identifying it, and making it very transparent to show is what has been kind of part of the reason we went through that rebranding effort. We wanted to not only be seen differently internally, but also kind of showcase that skill set to our leadership and also change our mindset for our team members.
I think that's a really important message for our listeners. That and rebranding can sometimes help to do that because you use that as a catalyst to advertise, to have a conversation, etc. So obviously, this wouldn't be a 2026. Gosh, I haven't said that yet on a podcast. You're on my first podcast in 2026. Thank you for
Happy
that.
New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year. It wouldn't be a 2026 podcast without the words AI in it. Do you feel that these Agile Delivery Leads that's helping extend their sort of like value almost? Because I mean, Pega's a very AI literate company anyway. It's always been, well, it used to be called data and analytics and machine learning, but now it's called AI. You've always been at the forefront of that in terms of technology, but in terms of your products, but the driving in as all these new ideas, whether it's the use of Gemini, Copilot, whatever. And I have to say, software engineers are the least receptive people that I've come into contact with the use of AI. I'll be honest. Product people are pretty close to that, by the way, as well. And it tends to be just random people that use it much more. So are these people kind of helping to drive improved adoption of, AI is just the latest technology, but any automation and any enablement?
I think it's a core focus for this year, definitely. I would say, this has moved so quickly, but last year, our focus was really setting a baseline for everybody. You talked about the literacy level. Are you using these tools in your daily basis? Are you familiar with them? Are you interacting with them? That was kind of like the core baseline thing. Now we're beyond that, and I'm trying to find tangible use cases that we can actually impact. So I'm sure there's folks out there that want to have a Scrum Master AI agent, right, in their group. I think you can get them in Copilot or other places. The key piece is, what can you bring to your team or your immediate group to kind of amplify not only your own baseline learning, but can you also bring that into your team? And I think during that Give Thanks for Scrum event, that also became pretty clear from many other folks that they're thinking about that, how to make AI a team member, if you will. And that's something that we're starting to iterate on.
And Agile Delivery Leads are the catalyst for that introduction from our experience, because everybody else is either too close to the work, so they're like, yes, they're obviously using AI to improve their emails and even their code, and doing tests, etc. But the ability to stand back from it all and say, okay, so let's get an agentic agent, an agent to some sort of AI to be a team member, to step back from the. I think Agile, from what I'm seeing, Agile Delivery Leads or Scrum Masters are a great set of people to drive that, and that's something that I'm definitely pushing in 2026.
Yeah, definitely. I think just being the change agents in the organization, there is an aspect of almost art. It's definitely a skill, almost art, to communicating effective, organizational behavior and change. And if you kind of put AI in that same bucket, it could be just like a process improvement. It could be just like something else. And you need to roll that out effectively, make sure people understand what you're trying to achieve. You want to do it in a way that's receptive, allow them to be part of the decision-making process, and allow enough time that you're not getting that change fatigue. So certainly a big aspect of it.
And manage those fears that, obviously, as a software developer, we're very cognizant of the fact that large companies are laying off massive amounts of software developers with the idea because of its AI. So it is managing that balance, between delivering value, etc. Okay, well, Brodie, thank you for spending the time as we bring this podcast to a close, I'd love you to sort of, if we've got listeners throughout the world who are maybe some of them work at Pega, Pega Systems. So I would love what would so what would be your words of wisdom, particularly with respect to the Scrum Masters? You've done this
Sure.
recent rebranding. You've sort of like tweaked their role to be cross-product, cross-team, focused on trying to drive real business change. What would be the sort of words of wisdom you would leave our listeners with?
I want to be seen as the first person that you go to, or first group or first role that you go to when you have a challenging business problem to solve. I do not want to be seen as, here's the process people, right? Here is the, X, Y, or Z, interject whatever you think there. So when I've seen the most success is people are, knocking on our door saying, I've got a really hard challenge and I need help. What can you do for me? And the wider your skill set is, the more agile background you have, the more project management background you have, the more people, communication skills that you have, the more successful you'll be in that. And I think you just go out and solve some of the hardest problems, and people are going to keep knocking on your door. So that's the advice that I would give.
Wow, that's actually awesome, because that's exactly what I believe Scrum Masters in particular, that should be what they spend every day. They are the problem solvers inside organizations to make those organizations more effective, to deliver more value, and to make them more humane as well. I think that because I think those two are linked. I know there's much debate in the world now, but I honestly do believe that happier people deliver more stuff and better stuff.
Definitely.
Based on my experience in restaurants in particular, if you get a grumpy server, the last thing you're going to do is have a fabulous experience in that restaurant. So I think that acting as that catalyst, I think that's great words of wisdom, Brodie. I really, really appreciate that. And thank you for spending the time today on this sunny January morning in the Boston area.
Thank you very much, Dave. I appreciate it.
Great. And thank you, listeners, for spending the time listening to this podcast. I was very lucky today because I got to talk to Brodie Green from Pega Systems. He's a director of Agile Delivery Services based here in the Boston area. And he was sharing his insights, or Pega's, I guess, Pega Systems insights on their very long journey around agility, really the challenges of scale, and ultimately, I think the message that he sent was, it's not one framework, it's not one approach. You have to build your own. Sometimes, unfortunately, that requires you to experience using those approaches as one, and then seeing how that goes, which is interesting. And then he moved on to talking about the Scrum Master and how it's evolved into the Agile Delivery Lead, and how they should be in your organization the go-to people for really solving those tricky problems that are stopping your organization from being absolutely amazing and delivering a lot more value and changing the world that it works in. So pretty good messages from Brodie today here in the podcast. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe, share with friends, and of course, come back and listen to some more. I'm lucky enough to have a variety of guests talking about everything in the area of professional Scrum, product thinking, and of course, Agile. Thanks, everybody, and Scrum on.